What is the secret sauce to writing an unrejectable personal statement? Well, today I'm not only going to show you how to plan your personal statement, but also how to structure, write it, and I will also talk about the secret sauce that makes your personal statement truly unrejectable. By the way, if you want access to the actual personal statement that got me into Oxford University, it's linked in the description below. So there is this big misconception about personal statements, which is that a lot of people just recite what they've already written in their CV. But that is not the point of the personal statement. The personal statement is actually there to tell a story. Who are you as a person? What motivates you? Why do you want to study this specific subject? It is not about just enumerating all of the achievements and grades that you have had. It's more about explaining what journey you went through to get where you are now and what you have learned along the way. So that's why it's super important to first plan out what you actually want to put into that story. So what I usually really like to do is to kind of draw a timeline. I know a lot of people prefer mind maps, but I think they can be quite overwhelming when it comes to structuring your personal statement later, whereas with timelines, it is much easier to create a story out of it. So let me show you what I usually do. So I usually have a sheet of paper, or I open an app where I have this arrow, and this arrow basically represents time from when you were a younger self to your current self. And the timeline itself depends on you. It depends on if you're applying for bachelor's, you probably want to start your timeline earlier. If you're applying for a PhD, the timeline probably starts around when you finish your A-levels. But basically, it's all about trying to write down all of the information that you can think of that is relevant to this course in a logistic timeline. So in order to explain this a little bit better, I'm just gonna say we are applying to a PhD in science. So this is just an example. This template really applies to any subject or any type of course that you apply to, no matter if it's bachelor's or PhD. So the first thing we want to think about is your academic background, because it is the easiest and it is also something that you definitely want to include in your personal statement. We can start off thinking about high school or your A-levels. Were there any relevant courses or workshops that you had in your A-levels or your high school that really fit your course? So for example, I could say in my A-levels, I had a very centric focus on science, and I also did a research project in the lab. This is just an example. So the key thing here is really to identify what is relevant for the current course that you're applying to. And also, with every experience or any subject that you note down, how this has helped you. What is it that you learned from it, and what was your takeaway from it? And we're going to do this for every single next step of your academic path. So after A-levels, you probably did a bachelor's. And again, what were the relevant courses? Were there any professors that inspired you? And also think about any coursework or also research projects that you did during this time. And again, think about what did you do during these research projects, what did you learn from them, and what was your key takeaway? Like, how did it change you as a person, or for example, in this case, as a scientist? And then again, the same for a master's if you have one. So after your academic background, we're going to think about your work experience. And this actually doesn't even have to be relevant to your course, but you're going to make it relevant. There's actually a lot of soft skills you can take from this and then apply it to the course that you're looking for. So for example, if you worked as a waitress, it shows that you can work in very stressful environments. You show that you work well in a team and that you're good at multitasking, for example. So this is how you turn a job that seems irrelevant for your current path into something that can actually be quite valuable for your personal statement, because you explain all of these skills that you have as a person, not by saying that you have them, but by showing them. Other types of work experiences are, of course, those that are relevant to your course. That is also really important to note down, because that is where you probably have gained a lot of the skills that you will have to use for your upcoming degree. This can be both soft skills, but also skills like working in the lab, coding, and also how has this experience shaped your mind of wanting to be in science? How has it shaped your interest in pursuing this course? Just anything that comes to your mind, note it down. So the next thing I usually focus on is hobbies. Hobbies are actually very important in the personal statement, because they don't just look for the perfect candidate based on your academic background, but also based on who you are as a person and the potential they see in you. So if they see that you have been dedicated to a specific hobby and have learned certain skills through that hobby, that makes you an interesting person, and that gives you a much higher chance to be invited for an interview. So for example, you love football, you have played football for the entirety of your life basically. Mention that. That is something unique about you. And there are a lot of soft skills again that you learn throughout this experience. For example, if you play football, again, it really shows that you're great at team working. It shows that you're dedicated, that you can work through tough times. All of these things are so worth mentioning because it is likely that most people applying to this course that you're applying to have a great academic background. So this is the thing that really makes you stand out. Now, something that is actually one of the most important things to think about is, what is your motivation? Why have you chosen to go down this career or academic path? So for that, think about, why do you want to be in science, but also why do you want to do this specific course? You can think about, do you remember the time that was like the spark for you to get into science? And then you can think about, throughout your whole life afterwards, were there specific moments that confirm, oh, this is the right path for me? This could be work experience, this could be academic background, this could be reading a book, meeting a certain person. Basically note down, what is your drive? What motivates you? Try to be quite specific. So if your PhD in science is in cancer research, focus on cancer research for your motivation. So don't focus just in science because that would be a bit too general. You really want to think about, how can you craft this personal statement in a way that when the professor reads it, he knows that you're specifically talking about his project and his subject area. Also think about, why is it that you actually want to do a PhD and not just be, for example, in the industry as a researcher? Think about, what do you want to gain out of this PhD? Because in the end of the day, they want to see that you're doing the PhD for a reason as well. What is it about this PhD position that gives you the skills that you want to use in the future? So if you want to be a scientist, and you're applying for a PhD that has a lot of wet lab skills, mention, for example, a specific experiment or a specific method that was mentioned in the description of the PhD. And finally, we're going to think about challenges you had in your life. Talking about challenges really helps to paint a picture of who you are as a person and how you have grown throughout your life. We all face challenges, and it is more than okay to talk about it, because then we can highlight how it has helped us grow into the person that we are now. Let's say you broke your hand. That is obviously terrible for a football player because that means you can't play football anymore. So you can say how this has been a difficult time in your life and why. But after that, really think about, what did you learn from this process and how did it make you a better person? Or a final example could be when you did your master's thesis, it was your first research project and you really struggled with failure. It is something that you weren't used to. And then you can say how you've identified that in research it is just normal that experiments go wrong, and now you are more mature and you know how to deal with failure basically. So now that we have this timeline, it will be super easy to write a personal statement and craft a really nice story. So let's start with the structure of a personal statement. Now keep in mind that the word count really differs between courses. So when I applied for a master's, I was allowed to write 2+ pages. When I applied for my PhD, I was only allowed to write less than a page. So it's really important to make sure you are within the word limit. So let's say you're allowed to write 1 page. So the first thing you want to write about is a brief introduction. This can be 2 to 3 sentences maximum. And the point of an introduction is to catch the attention of the reader and quickly highlight your motivation and what you're applying for. So next, we're going to talk about your academic background and also relevant work experience. So just experience that actually has something to do with the subject that you're studying. And what I prefer to do is kind of start from the beginning of when your motivation started all the way to where you are now, but as concise as possible, and only mention those things that either sparked your motivation more or show that you gained really key skills that are important for the subject. And then at the end of this academic background or work experience, I would then link it to why is it that you're excited to do this specific project. Now after this, you want to focus on explaining who you are as a person. And the best way to do that is to talk about your hobbies and talk about your soft skills and about the challenges that you have had and how they have made you grow as a person. And then finally, just a conclusion sentence to round everything off. This is the general structure that you want to have for your personal statement based on the timeline that we have prepared before. So throughout this video, I've actually mentioned some of the key ingredients of the secret sauce of writing a personal statement. If you're wondering, this is actually sriracha, but just metaphorically, let's just go through the short list of the key ingredients to making your personal statement unrejectable. So the first one is, don't recite your CV or any of the other documents that you already upload onto the application platform, but rather tell a story and explain to them who you are as a person and what you've done throughout your life to get to where you are now and where you want to be in the future. Number 2, plan out your story beforehand to make sure that it flows well, that it makes sense, and that it is also concise. Number 3, really tailor your personal statement to the specific program that you're applying to. Yes, it is a lot more hassle and it is a lot more work, but your chances to getting into an interview are much, much higher. Number 4, emphasize your motivation. That is literally the key thing. And then finally, sprinkle in your personality. Of course, you can use AI, especially for spell check or grammar, or making it sound a bit more concise, but make sure that you keep your personal touch, because otherwise it just sounds too generic. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're interested in how I organized my entire life as an Oxford PhD student, click this video up there. If you like more of these types of videos, let me know down in the comments and I'll see you next time. Bye!